across the pavement, hoping it'll cave and swallow me whole. Wonder why my mind keeps on spinning. This is how I live into me what's so.
I ultimately wrote something that contains a quote from you, and this was something that I wrote about the warrior ethos. I wrote, "What is a warrior? A warrior is a way of life, a way of thinking, a way of being. Carlos Castaneda says we choose only once, to be warriors or ordinary. We choose only once, because choosing to be a warrior alters your fundamental approach to life. While others will view everything as a blessing or a curse, you will see only challenges, and a warrior lives to overcome challenges. Every warrior has a code, an ethos. It is an invisible thread that connects him to all of his warrior brothers and sisters since the beginning of time. Stephen Pressfield asks, how do we find our true calling, our soul companions, our destiny? He answers, in this task, our mightiest ally is the warrior ethos."
Ah, well, that's great, huh?
Yeah.
You wrote that at that time, huh?
Yeah, that was right around at that time, and so I wanted to open this up because you also put out a great video series, which I highly recommend to people just recently, that's talking about, warrior archetype and the warrior ethos. And I was very much in that archetype of my being, and perhaps still am to some certain extent, although I feel some transitioning happening. And we'll talk about archetypes too. But you've seen with all of your work, not all of your work, and of course the Warrior Ethos book, you have this deep affinity for this, understanding of the warrior archetype. And it was incredibly useful for me, but I'd just like to hear, from your perspective, and I know you talked about it a little bit on your video series, where it came from for you, and what it means, and then let's just kind of unpack it a little bit.
Well, it's sort of, it really, I've done a few podcasts lately and done a few interviews lately with veterans and guys that are, former Navy SEALs and stuff like that. And they've sort of asked me if this comes from my own experience in the military, and it really does not. It really comes from this. It's really the whole sort of warrior concept, inner warrior, mental warrior, the inner game, the inner war, comes from, facing the blank page as a writer and doing the inner challenge that you have to write, not just to write one thing, but to have a body of work, and to maintain a focus over a long period of time, a marathon, not a sprint. And that metaphor, the warrior metaphor, really just resonated with me, that the virtues of a warrior, of patience, of perseverance, of courage, and like what you say a lot on it, the kind of willing embrace of adversity, of willingly choosing the hard life. And so that, for me, it's mental more than anything else. But to be a writer, to be an artist, to be an entrepreneur, to be anybody that has to be self-disciplined, not disciplined from some external source. You need to call on some sort of inner Obi-Wan Kenobi, inner Musashi Miyamoto, something like that. And so those, I think of myself that way. And that's kind of how it evolved. And the other thing, and I don't want to start wandering in what we're talking here, but the books that I've written, like Gates of Fire and Tides of War, that were set in the ancient world and that were about warfare, about ancient warfare, came as a complete surprise to me when I started writing them. It wasn't like I wanted to do this since I was 11 years old, or I followed any, I was, playing Assassin's Creed or anything like that. So in other words, what I'm trying to say, I guess, Aubrey, is that this was in me somehow, even though I didn't know it and I didn't plan it. And it just, like you, I was constantly looking for anything that would work. Please give me something that works,
Yes,
and,
I feel you.
Well, I'll take anything, and I'm sure like you, I went down a lot of roads, but
sure, I made it. I made a men's nail polish company. I mean, I was trying everything.
Hey, that doesn't surprise me at all, but yeah. So anyway, that's sort of how it kind of came about for me.
Yeah.
Embracing that kind of warrior archetype and ethos.
It's interesting in your video series about the warrior, you talk a lot about archetypes and Jungian archetypes. And it seems like for some of us, that warrior archetype is just in us stronger. And for me, I remember, I was drawn to all the plastic sword. I had the greatest collection of plastic swords for a 5-year-old probably of all time. And I would go fight sand piles, and I would imagine, conquests, and I would write little stories sitting on my grandma's lap about knights saving damsels in distress. And then going through all school, I would study, I actually majored in classical civilization. Why? Mostly because I was interested in the same stories that you're interested in, Plutarch's Lives and these different tales and the stories of how the Roman legions would fight and square off against each other and how the different, phalanxes were formed. And I was just so interested in not so much modern warfare. That wasn't the thing that really drew me. And of course I, read some Richard Marcinko and some, Navy SEAL kind of books and things, but it was really like the older archetype that really kind of called me forward. But there was no battle that really made sense. And this is the interesting thing. Back then in Sparta, there was real war. Like you were going to use your sword, you were going to use your shield, and you were going to use your spear, and you were going to point it at somebody at some point. Sometimes it was the Persians, sometimes it was other Greeks. And it was this clear external challenge. But for the modern warrior, we feel called to that archetype, but we're like, where do we point our spears? Like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And really, ultimately, we end up having to point it towards our art, the inner war.
Yes. I mean, it's like that joke on Seinfeld that he had about everybody going to the gym. It's like they're all training, but what are you training for? You're not in the NBA or anything like that, but it is for that. It's training for whatever our particular calling is or our destiny or whatever it is that, following, our bliss, if you want to quote Joseph Campbell, whatever that is, that inner fight.
You can easily bend the limbs, but when that tree gets deep rooted and grows, if you try to bend the limb, it'll break. And so you're looking at these baby boomers, and the coding and program is so embedded in them for so many years that it's they've become rooted trees. They've grown and they've got stiff bark, and you can't really bend those limbs. They'll just snap. And a lot of them aren't ready for that information. So you have to just, I tell people who always ask me, how do I get my family members to wake up, and how do I said, you just be the light. You just do what you do. Don't put pressure on them. Every now and then you may drop a gentle seed, and that's about it. And just let them look at your life and how you're moving. Eventually they may start to ask some questions. Right. And then you can answer the question and walk away. Don't go too deep again. Just little bit at baby steps, a little bit at a time. Some of them will come along, some of them may not. Just be happy that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're finding yourself. And then others will also see how you're moving and how you're living through this matrix. And then they will then begin to ask you questions. And some people will jump right on in with you, full blown. Some people will take time. It's a gradual process, but like you said, you can't overdo it.
Everybody's in their own game.
Exactly. Lead by example. Just lead by example. If it's not for you, it's not for you. If it's
right. Like, and you know them by their fruit.
Yes. Right. Right.
It's like, did we miss that message? Like, people by their fruit, meaning their actions show you who they are.
Exactly.
So that whole I'm woke because you. So here it is. Let's go back. I was about to go full into that, which is, okay, you got the information, you got all this knowledge. Neo, when he went, he got into the chair, got the thing plugged into him, and he was sitting there for hours just downloading information, right? And he said, and he told Morpheus, I know Kung Fu. Morpheus said what? Show me.
Right.
Right.
Oh,
right.
you know. Show me.
Exactly.
Right. It's the action that proves it.
So
right.
he went in that simulation again to show him he knew kung fu. And what did Morpheus do? He whipped his ass.
Yep.
Beat him down.
He beat him down. He's training him the whole way. Yeah, you learn some information, but you can't apply it.
Until you apply that information, it's not real. It's not in this realm. It doesn't exist. It just exists in your mind.
Yes.
Until you apply it.
Absolutely. That happens to me all the time. People